search to find the love within.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the first official episode of the Premier Podcast. A podcast that I'm hoping will become one of your go-to podcasts. We'll be covering sports. We'll get right into it just shortly, and I hope you all enjoy. So as you can tell by the title of the video, this is a 2018 year in review for sports. So I'll be going over from January all the way until December 2018. So I guess we'll just get right into it. So at the beginning of January, we saw some big games. In the wild card round of the AFC, we saw the Buffalo Bills playing the Jacksonville Jaguars, and it was a terrible game, 14-7. We saw Nathan Peterman, the greatest quarterback to ever grace the football field. He came onto the field as Tyrod Taylor suffered what many thought was going to be a concussion in that game. Terrible game. I think it was 14-7 was the final score. After that, we saw the Minneapolis Miracle. Vikings blew a large lead, then were down 1 point, 24-23, heading into, I think it was the last 10 seconds of the game. And Case Keenum on third down and 10 threw a bomb to Stephon Diggs. Marcus Williams had maybe one of the worst missed tackles in NFL history. Missing that tackle, careening into the cornerback, and Stephon Diggs had nothing but green grass in front of him, and he just went the whole distance. Vikings would, it was the final play of the game. They wound up winning that game. They would go on to Philadelphia, where they got creamed 38-7. Terrible. I went into that game believing that it was going to be an easy win for the Vikings, and they were going to be having basically a home game for the Super Bowl versus, there was really no doubt it was going to be the Patriots, though they did have to come back. They were down big at half. After the shenanigans, we saw Alabama came from behind. They were down 13-0 at the half, and Nick Saban winds up putting in the redshirt freshman Tua Tagovailoa. He would lead his team back. In the second half, they outscored Georgia 20-7. They went on a 20-7 run to head into overtime. They wound up winning 26-23. That's pretty good. And of course, that long pass on 2nd and 26 to seal it in overtime to get that touchdown pass, it was great. That was amazing. I thought that was just spectacular. Because, I don't know. I like Nick Saban, I guess. I like the way that Alabama has built their program. Because Nick Saban, when he came in, they weren't great. But Nick Saban he's just my favorite college football coach, and I respect him immensely. So the AFC wound up winning the Pro Bowl, which, if you don't care, you don't care. So there we have it. Moving on to February. First thing that comes to mind, Super Bowl 52. What I would say is an upset. The Eagles upset the Patriots 41-33. I was a little bit upset by that. I kind of wanted the Patriots to win. I was kind of salty after, we had Minnesota lose by 31 to Philadelphia. Nick Foles wound up winning the Super Bowl MVP for an amazing performance. I haven't seen a performance that good in a long time. 41-33, your final score. I think that Tom Brady, had he not fumbled on that last drive, they would have driven right down the field. They would have scored a touchdown. And I thought there was a pretty decent chance that they were going to score a touchdown anyways in that game on their final drive, but it, I guess, just wasn't to be. The 2018 Winter Olympics, which I thought were very exciting. I hadn't seen a lot of things like that in a while. Now, granted, I am 15, and the last time that there was a Winter Olympics, I was, 11, right? Yeah, I was 11. I guess I would have been 10 because I was 14 at the time of the Olympics. But Norway wound up winning the whole entire Olympics. They had the most medals. But what really comes to mind when you thought of it was the U.S. men's curling team. They were amazing. They were really an underdog. They beat Sweden in the gold medal. They're all from Minnesota, which is where I'm from, Lakeville, Minnesota. That's where we're coming to you from. Where it is a nice and chilly 2 degrees Fahrenheit. And with the wind chill, it's negative 11. That's the feel like. I don't... It's great. And it's only supposed to get colder. We're supposed to have 2 days in a row, Tuesday and Wednesday of next week, where it is supposed to be negative 26 and negative 27, so we probably won't have school. So I think that'll be pretty cool. But moving on from February and the absolute frigid temperatures that we have here in Minnesota, we got to move on to March. March Madness was arguably, some would say, one of the best March Madnesses ever. In round one, UMBC became the first ever team, the first ever number 16 seed to beat a number 1 seed. They beat Virginia, and they beat them big. It was tied 21-21 at the half. They wound up winning by 20. I mean, it was amazing. It was such a great game. Go Retrievers. And I'm not a UMBC fan, but for that game, I certainly was. Another game that really comes to mind, another team that really comes to mind at least, Loyola of Chicago, the 11 seed. First game ended on a buzzer-beating 3. It was such a great game versus Miami. I picked them to win that game. I didn't pick them to win the next game because usually I don't pick underdogs to go that deep, but whatever. Loyola, the 11 seed, beating Miami, the number 6 seed, Jim Boeheim. I'll never forget how it was the three-pointer, and he throws his hands on his head in defeat. It was such a great game. Then they wound up beating Tennessee with Admiral Schofield. That was a good game as well. Man, there were so many good games. That's why I think that this is the greatest March Madness ever, because the amount of upsets. Nevada, they came from behind to beat Mo Bamba and the Texas Longhorns. They would later come from behind to beat Cincinnati. I mean, they came back and they beat them big. They came back from down 20, and they just destroyed them in the second half. They wound up winning by a point, I believe it was. And Cincinnati. Speaking of Cincinnati, we'll also bring in Xavier because they both are located in Cincinnati. Both of those teams choked. They just choked. They both won their first game. Once we reached that second game, I was sure that Cincinnati was going to go to the Final Four because Virginia was gone, and then the rest of it was like Loyola and Kansas State and UMBC and Nevada. I guess have to watch out for Nevada, but they wound up losing to Florida State, remember? And both them and Cincinnati just completely choked. They had big leads. They had double-digit leads in both of those games, both of those teams. And they just choked. They choked it away. Florida State had no reason to beat that team. I'm just letting you know. Marshall wound up beating Wichita State. That Wichita State team was a great team, and I thought that Wichita State was going to be amazing, but I don't know. I guess maybe they just weren't to be. Cincinnati beat them in, I think it was the American Championship. But I thought that Wichita State was going to go deep, and they wound up getting destroyed by Marshall's three-point game. They were too good. The Marshall three-point game was just way too good. Buffalo beat DeAndre Ayton and Arizona, and they beat him by 20 at least. I think it was like 26 or something like that. And DeAndre Ayton, you could tell that team with Arizona had just completely just given up. They were done. Villanova seemed unstoppable from the beginning. Dante DiVincenzo, my favorite player on that team was Dante DiVincenzo. Jalen Brunson was very good on that team. McCall Bridges was very good. Eric Pascal was good. Booth is still on the team. So I if it wasn't for Virginia having been so good in the regular season, then I would have picked Villanova. I don't know if you remember, but Providence, when they beat Xavier and they beat Butler, and they took Villanova to overtime in the Big East Championship, and oh my God, I thought that team was going to win. And then I also thought that they were going to win their game against Texas A&M, but they didn't. Rhode Island had another great first game. They beat Trae Young and the Oklahoma Sooners, going to OT. I picked Rhode Island to win that game because I really like Rhode Island. I thought that Rhode Island has a very good team. Now their coach is coaching for UConn, which kind of makes me upset, but whatever. Syracuse had another great stretch of games. They beat TCU and Michigan State. But then they played Duke. They couldn't beat Duke. I was cheering for them versus Duke. And speaking of Duke, they were knocked out early yet again. Kansas knocking Grayson Allen and the Duke Blue Devils out of the tournament before the Final Four yet again, which is very unfortunate. Jumping back to Loyola, which I was talking about earlier, they would go on to beat Tennessee. Then they would beat Nevada. Marcus Towns knocking down a 3 with under 5 to go. to put his team up 4 versus Nevada and to basically send them to the Elite Eight, where they played Kansas State, and they played such a good game. They would win by, I think it was either 15 or 16. It was less by 20, I know that. And they would make it to their first ever Final Four, where they would play Michigan. And when they played Michigan, I thought that they were going to win that game because they were up by 15. 15 or 16 was their highest lead, and they wound up losing that game, and I was so upset because Loyola, if they had went to the championship, oh my god, I would have watched that game. I think it would have been a pretty decent game between Villanova and Loyola because they would have had something to prove. Loyola has something to prove. It's not just oh my god, we just win a couple games here or there. We beat a high seed in Michigan, and we have a chance to take home a national title versus one of the best Villanova teams over the past couple of years. So moving on from March Madness, Villanova would later go on to win. But moving on from March Madness, the MLB season starts. And we've got a lot of big teams. You got Boston, basically a super team with Mookie, JD. You got the 3 Bs out in the outfield. Betts, Benintendi, and Bradley. You've also got Mitch Moreland, which is kind of a sneaky first base backup. They had Hanley Ramirez. He would later not be on that team, and they wouldn't miss him. Brock Holt, one of the best utility guys in the major leagues. You got Xander Bogaerts, Rafael Devers, I already mentioned, JD Martinez. Then you got Chris Sale, David Price. Drew Pomeranz proved to be a very good pitcher. They would later get Nathan Eovaldi later in the season, and he would prove to be such a great player as well in the World Series. The Dodgers had another pretty decent team. I thought that the Twins were going to easily make it to the wild card game for the second year in a row, but it turned out that Brian Dozier forgot how to swing a baseball bat and couldn't go more than 3 at-bats without striking out, which is great. They would later trade him, which is whatever. I mean, I'm fine with that, I guess. Patrick Reed would win the Masters, if you care about the Masters. I watch the Masters when it's on. I don't know. I like to watch it. But Patrick Reed would win that. The Timberwolves break their playoff drought. They should have been a top 4 seed, in my opinion. But then Jimmy Butler got hurt, had to have knee surgery, and they were out of the playoffs before he came back. If he hadn't have been on that team, people were complaining about him this year. If it's not for him, they weren't in the playoffs last year. I hope we all realize that. I must be one of the only Timberwolves fans that was not happy to see Jimmy Butler go. And I know that we got some pretty good players in Robert Covington and Dario Saric and Jared Bayless, but I'd rather have Jimmy Butler. Just give him his money. I feel like that was the root of the issue. He knows that he's worth a lot of money, so why not give him that money? He's an Olympian. He's in the Olympics. He was in the Olympics for a reason. It's because he's one of the best basketball players on the planet. But with him, they did manage to break their playoff drought. And they won a game at home against Houston. Unbelievable. And they had a pretty decent chance to have taken that to a 6th or even maybe a 7th game. But they could only make it 5, which is unfortunate. They would get beat 4-1. At least they didn't get swept, which I think is pretty good. In the NFL draft, we didn't know who I'm a Cleveland Browns fan. I just like to make that known right now. I live in Minnesota. I am a Cleveland Browns fan. Don't ask me why, but I like the Cleveland Browns. So sue me. So basically, I didn't know who they were going to pick number 1 overall. I was praying that they didn't pick Sam Darnold. I don't like Sam Darnold. I didn't think he was that good. I don't know why you had Colin Cowherd over here calling him, oh, he's one of the best quarterbacks to come out of the draft in years. Well, okay, he's not that good. He contributed to over 75% of his team's total turnovers while he was at USC. He single-handedly lost the game versus Washington State over in the earlier season. It just didn't make any sense to me why they all thought he was so good. But I thought that Baker Mayfield was a good pick. I thought that he was much better than everybody else. I think that the 2 best quarterbacks to come out of that draft were the 2 that people said were not worthy of a first-round pick. Lamar Jackson and Baker Mayfield. And you know what? I think that Baker Mayfield is better than Lamar Jackson. And you can say, oh, well, he didn't beat him in the last game of the season. He could have. I think that if Greg Joseph goes out there and kicks that field goal, probably would have, but I got nothing to say other than that. Then you pick Denzel Ward, number 4, another Pro Bowler. So you have Denzel Ward in the Pro Bowl, which is, oh my God, what an amazing performance he had throughout the season. He was one of the best rookies. He was probably the best rookie defensive back, probably beating out Minkah Fitzpatrick. I thought Minkah Fitzpatrick was very good. Moving on from the Browns, you've got the Giants picking Saquon Barkley over a quarterback, which I think was a good move. Many may say, oh, you shouldn't have picked Saquon. You should have picked a quarterback. Well, they got Kyle Lauletta, who I didn't think was going to be a good quarterback anyways, but it doesn't matter because you need to have that backup, and you pick a guy that proved himself in college that can be a backup. So he won that backup role. But I think that they held out. They didn't need to pick a quarterback. They knew that they could probably get by one more year with Eli Manning starting every single game. And then this year is the year that they're going to pick Dwayne Haskins, or possibly you're going to pick Kyler Murray, but I don't think Kyler Murray is going to be picked number 1 or number 2. Overall, I know that Giants don't have a number 1 or number 2 overall pick. I'm just saying I don't think he's going to be a top 10 pick. I don't know if he's even a top 20 pick. But I don't know. Daniel Jones, I think, would be a good pick. I think that he's pretty good. I think that Dwayne Haskins might be pretty good. I don't think he's going to be elite. I don't think that Kyler Murray is going to be elite. I think Daniel Jones has the best talent out of all the quarterbacks in the draft. That's my opinion. If you don't agree with it, then you don't agree with it. What do you want me to do about it? But yeah, you got the Vikings picking Mike Hughes, and he was pretty good in the few games that he played. In his first career game, he had a pick 6 off of the greatest quarterback to ever grace the football field, besides Nathan Peterman, Jimmy Garoppolo. Yeah, we're going to, I guess, move on from April, because there wasn't a whole lot going on in April. We'll move on to May. So in May, you have Justify, the horse, winning the Kentucky Derby and the Preakness Stakes. He would also later win the Belmont. He is the second ever to win the Triple Crown with an undefeated record, following Seattle Slew. So Justify win the Kentucky Derby, of course. The Capitals won their first ever Stanley Cup versus the Vegas Golden Knights, the first ever expansion team to make it to the Stanley Cup Finals, and probably the greatest expansion team ever for their first season at least. But that's amazing. I thought they were so good, the Vegas Golden Knights. Oh my God, they were so good. They proved themselves. Marc-Andre Fleury had amazing. It was just great. The Warriors also swept the Cavaliers in the NBA Finals, but they could have. The first 2 games could have went the Cavaliers' way. If everybody talks about J.R. Smith missing, like making a bad play. The free throw was missed. That would have put the Cavaliers ahead by 1. The free throw was missed. So yes, J.R. Smith grabbed a rebound that he could have put up for the win, but the free throw was missed. Let's not forget that. And there were not a whole lot of people who mentioned that. The only time that I saw it was on a meme page on Not Sports Center on Instagram. So there's that for you on how great, the sports journalism world is right now. And then there was a charging call that went against the Cavaliers with Kevin Durant making maybe a shady kind of, maybe shouldn't have been a charging call, but those were a couple of plays that really could have swung in the Cavaliers' favor, would have given them those first 2 games, and they would have had a 2-0 lead heading back to Cleveland and have a pretty good chance. But this year, I don't see anyone beating the Warriors for it. Maybe Houston, but with DeMarcus Cousins back, I don't really see if there's going to be a way that they're going to manage that, but I don't know. That's just me. Well, you got Brooks Koepka in June winning the U.S. Open, which is fine. World Cup starts. The FIFA World Cup 2018. It was the first World Cup that I watched. Because because I was too young really to understand soccer at all, and I wasn't really a fan of soccer when I was little. I didn't get it. I didn't get why people. I didn't really get why people like it, but now I do. Russia was the bottom-ranked team in their home country. That was where they were playing it, and they were below even Saudi Arabia, and they showed these guys why they should have been way up there. They beat some really good teams. They beat Spain. And all the penalty kick shootouts. You got Croatia with the run of the century. They make it to the finals, but they get beat by France because France was so good. Iceland, the underdog story, unfortunately didn't win any games, but they beat Argentina 1-1. You got Messi sitting there probably in his final World Cup game, and he misses a penalty kick. He missed it. And Iceland manages to win 1-1. You've got no U.S. men's team. The U.S. didn't make it because they lost to Trinidad and Tobago. What? How? Well, I watched an SB Nation video. It was about 10 minutes long, and oh my God, how? They lost to Trinidad and Tobago. I don't even know how you say it. I didn't even know that was a thing until they lost. So, they didn't make it, proving why the U.S. doesn't belong in anything other than curling and women's hockey. I forgot to mention that. The women's hockey team won a gold medal in Canada, against Canada, but whatever. The NBA draft happened. DeAndre Ayton, out of Arizona, selected number 1 overall, goes to the Suns to waste away his career. I haven't heard much of him this season, and it's probably because he plays for the Suns, which I get it. Also, we see Trae Young getting selected by the Hawks, which I think was a pretty decent pick at least. Josh Okogie was picked by the Timberwolves, and he's played pretty good, in my opinion. I think he's played pretty well. He's played good enough to at least stand out as a rookie, to kind of stand out as a pretty good player. So yeah, I just pulled up DeAndre Ayton's stats. He's playing 30 minutes a game. He's missed the last 4 games. I remember that. He's injured. But in the games he's played, he's averaged 30 minutes. He's averaging 16 points a game. He's shooting 59%, averaging 10 rebounds and 2 assists. He had a 17-rebound game on the January 17th versus Toronto. He also put up 15. But he doesn't shoot too much. He shot 18 times versus Denver, but he's not shooting that much. So yeah, Luka Doncic. He was picked number 2 overall, yet I would call him a steal because the Suns had the chance to pick him, but they didn't. So they should have, coulda, woulda, but whatever. I am now realizing that I just said that Luka Doncic was picked number 2 overall, when in reality he wasn't. He was picked number 3 overall because I'm dumb. I also had a baseball game the night of the draft, so forgive me because I wasn't watching the draft. So yeah, whatever, doesn't even matter. So, we move on to July, and July saw the AL winning the MLB All-Star Game. And I remember, I think that was a pretty good All-Star Game. That's just my opinion. There's a lot of home runs. Jose Barrios did not allow anything. Also, the All-Star selection, why was Eddie Rosario not picked for the All-Star Game? It's my first question. And I understand he was a final vote. I get it. But he was a final vote against Giancarlo Stanton, which isn't fair. I think that there should be, now I know that this would make sense. I think that there should be, see, now I don't know, and this is a lot of bias, but I think that if there's 2 people who have all-star level stats and have better stats than somebody like an outfielder he had way better stats average wise and OBP. I think OBP wise I know he didn't take as many walks, but whatever. Hitting wise, he had a lot more hits. He was a better hitter, not a better power hitter, but he was a better hitter at the time. He was batting .313 with almost 20 home runs. He had a lot of RBIs. It was in the 60s or 70s, and I think that he should have been an all-star. But that's just me. and Jose Barrios to get picked over him. And I understand that Jose Barrios had a lot of really good games this season, but that doesn't change my mind that Eddie Rosario was much more worthy, at least to me, of an All-Star game appearance. Either way, it doesn't matter. It happened. Hopefully Eddie Rosario has a All-Star game worthy first half this year, and hopefully an All-Star worthy season. Hopefully. I really don't want the Twins to do really bad this year. Alex Bregman won the MVP in the AL one. So, go AL, boys. France. I know I already mentioned this, but France defeated Croatia in the World Cup Championship game. That was a pretty good game, and Croatia had a chance towards the end. I thought that they were going to come back and win that game. They didn't. I was wrong. I think they should have won, but whatever. Moving on to August. Well, actually, before we move on to August, let's talk about a couple of the trades. Mike Moustakas was traded to the Brewers. Not a huge trade, but got the job done. Eduardo Escobar was traded out of Minnesota to Arizona. Brian Dozier was traded to the Los Angeles Dodgers. Lance Lynn was traded to the Yankees. A lot of trades, which is whatever. I think they were good trades as well. Nathan Eovaldi was traded to the Boston Red Sox, which I think was a good move. Tyler Austin acquired by the Twins, if I didn't already say that. Hopefully I didn't. We also saw Ian Kinsler being traded to the Red Sox, and he played pretty decently for the Red Sox. I don't think he played great. Instead, Steve Pearce, World Series hero, World Series MVP, was traded. But now we can move on to August, because who cares? We're moving on to August. Baker Mayfield proved why he was picked number 1 overall in his first game, really showing off his arm strength, his ability to move, his ability to throw on the run. And I don't know, they showed, as the Browns as a team, they showed that it was not going to be an 0-16 year. We thought, until they reached the regular season, but it was fine other than that. Red Sox made a late push to show that they were the top team in the AL East, and were probably the top team in all of baseball. Brewers and Cubs were still duking it out for the top spot in the NL Central. The Diamondbacks, at that point, had the NL West locked down. I mean, they had it completely locked down. And at the time, I thought that the Nationals were going to come back. And I thought that they were going to come back, and I thought that they were going to win that division. And instead, it was really the Braves kind of stole it right out of the hands of Rhys Hoskins and the Philadelphia Phillies, who kind of choked towards the end. Except for Aaron Nola, he really had it. If it wasn't for Jacob deGrom, he would have won that Cy Young. But it doesn't really matter. But yeah, the AL Central was locked up at that point. Yeah, the AL East was really pretty much locked up at that point. I mean, I know that the Yankees were thinking about it, but you're still like 15 games out or something like that. The West, there was a good chance, because the Athletics, through September even, were making a late push to take that division right away from the Astros. But instead, we didn't see that. Instead, we saw them not win a big series in Houston, and it all went down the hill from there. They wound up taking the second wild card spot, because you knew that whoever had the second wild card spot was not going to win that game, because you have to go to the Bronx and play the Yankees in their stadium. There's no way. Postseason Yankee Stadium is completely different than regular season Sunday night baseball on ESPN game, because you know the Yankees and the Red Sox, at least once a week, they have a game on Sunday, Friday, Tuesday, Thursday, any night of the week. You know it's going to be on Baseball Tonight, because ESPN thinks that every human being on earth wants to watch the Red Sox and or the Yankees, and not the very interesting Phillies versus Braves battle for the top of the division game that is going on across the United States, that people are actually interested in and would like to watch. But whatever, that's just my take. I always get kind of fed up with seeing the Yankees at least once a week on Baseball Tonight on ESPN, because I don't know, I'd rather watch a game that maybe doesn't have so much. I don't know, I'd like to watch the Marlins play the Mets, maybe. I don't know, I'd like to see a game with interesting players. with players that are trying to show that they deserve a big contract. JT Realmuto, oh my God, I'd love to see him play for a new contract because he knows that he is on a national stage and he's playing for that new contract. And the NL East was really it was a late push by the Braves, in my opinion. It was kind of a late choke by the Phillies, really, to fall out of that top spot in the NL East, because I thought that they had that locked down, and I thought that they were going to have such like a really, really, really good postseason. I was thinking that they were going to go to the World Series, but it wasn't to be. They couldn't. I don't think that they had the complete team, because we saw Carlos Santana struggle for the whole entire season, which I think is very unfortunate, because you know Carlos Santana, you know just as well as I do that Carlos Santana is a very talented player, and he isn't as good, I think, as he used to be when he was a first baseman. I don't think that he's as good as he used to be. But yeah, in the NL Central, the Cubs and Brewers really pulled away from the Cardinals. Matt Carpenter, they made that late push. You know, they did it. They picked it up a little bit, but they just could not finish. It just wasn't to be. They couldn't figure it out enough. Towards the end of the year, they didn't have the pitching. They had their select few star players. It was Matt Carpenter and Colton Wong and maybe Paul DeYoung a little bit, leading a team that wasn't built for postseason baseball, in my opinion. I don't know. The NL West was terrible for the top team. The Diamondbacks had that spot locked down. They were going to be one of the top teams. They were probably going to go to the NLCS, but they couldn't figure it out. And I don't know what happened. I mean, you got somebody to replace the injured and also not playing very great Jake Lamb. You've got Paul Goldschmidt, and you've got a great outfield. So then why are they struggling to win games? And they really struggled to win games at a time of the year that they couldn't afford to struggle. And the struggles would continue into September. And that is a great segue into the month of September. It started off with a lot of baseball losses. You have the Phillies continuing to really struggle. You have the Braves kind of showing why they needed to lock down that top spot, why they should have been considered for a playoff contender, at least, at the beginning of the year. And the Los Angeles Dodgers were kind of surging towards the top. There was a pretty good chance that they were going to grab that division. They were going to grab the NL West. And the Athletics kind of fell apart towards the end of the year. They didn't really fall apart, but in the games that they needed to win, they didn't quite win. The Diamondbacks, they were done. You could tell that they were done. You could tell that there was absolutely no way. David Peralta, Eduardo Escobar, Paul Goldschmidt, they all just weren't enough. They weren't enough to lead that team to the playoffs, which I find very unfortunate. If we move to football, you have the Cleveland Browns. First game of the season, they had such a chance because Joe Schobert intercepts that football. They get down near the 30, and I thought that Zane Gonzalez was going to hit that field goal, and they were going to get that first win of the season against their bitter rival, the Pittsburgh Steelers, and they should have won that game. And they showed I know that it was blocked by TJ Watt, but the kicker needs to make that kick, okay? And they showed that as a team, they were going to contend, at least for a little while. And it took 2 more weeks, but once they stuck Baker Mayfield in there, they won that game. They won it. They won their big game. They should have beaten the Saints, but Zane Gonzalez forgot how to kick a ball. Oh, he had a groin injury. Okay, he was cleared for the game, and now I know they had nobody else, but you can't tell me that he injured his groin literally the day before, and Dan Bailey was an option for the entire time. So why was he not at least considered for the job if they knew about that groin injury? Maybe they didn't know about it, but if they knew about it, I would be so mad if that were to come out and say, oh, we knew about it, we messed up, we probably should have signed a different kicker. But against the Saints, they should have won. They were up 18-7, I think it was, or something like that. No, because they had a tie. I don't know. But they were up pretty big heading into the last 5 minutes of the fourth quarter. They should have won that game. Michael Thomas led them down the field, scored a touchdown. Doesn't matter. And then Tyrod Taylor went down and put them in field goal range. They did it. They got themselves in the field goal range that they needed to be in, and they just completely... Zane Gonzalez, I will never for the rest of my life forgive him, because that was the game where they should have won their first game. They should have been 2-0, should have been 3-0, could have been 4-0 against the Buccaneers. Actually, no, against the Raiders, my bad. They could have been 4-0, but instead, they should have been 4-0, because they should have won that game against the Raiders, because it was total ref ball. I'm taking a term from Urinating Tree, but they should have been 4-0, because if you watch that, he clearly got the first down, and they ruled it a first down on the field. So either way, there was no video evidence that was going to overturn that call. And I don't know how they saw it. I don't know how they found it, but somehow they did. And it was the most blatant missed call before the pass interference call. We moved to the end of September, and things are starting to lock up in the MLB divisions, their postseasons, except for the NL Central and the NL West, because you have the Rockies and the Dodgers tying for the top of the division, and then the Brewers and the Cubs locking up their top of the division. They would go into pretty much a postseason game. It's like a wild card before a wild card. The right to see who goes to the wild card and most likely loses. And the Brewers, mostly thank you to Domingo Santana, managed to win their game. He had a big pinch hit late in the game, and they really showed why they would turn into that NLCS caliber team. And Christian Yelich really led that team. I thought that Christian Yelich had it was such a great opportunity for him to go play for a team that was actually going to do something, and not a team that was ran by an idiot named Derek Jeter. One of the best baseball players I've seen play, but front office wise, not my favorite. The Dodgers beat the Rockies to make it to the divisional series without having to play the Cubs in the wild card game. And the Rockies would actually wind up winning that wild card game. And then the A's against the Yankees in the wild card game, it wasn't really that close. It was close towards the beginning, but once we got to the end, it was really showing that it wasn't going to be that close. The NL wildcard game, it was such a great game. You got Tony Walters, Drew Butera, both having some huge hits. It was the greatest thing ever. And the Rockies would win that game, and they would go on to the divisional series. Around the same time, we saw Baker Mayfield lead his squad to their second win of the season versus the Ravens. The Vikings were showing some early season struggles. Kirk Cousins was really struggling to lead this team. He was really kind of struggling every once in a while throwing the ball, but I was hoping he would iron out those problems, but they would just prove to be more and more of an issue. Towards the end of October, we saw the ironing out of the really bad roughing the passer calls, and I think that we reached a certain point where referees started getting scared to make bad calls. You're going to make bad calls. Bad calls are going to happen. I would rather make a call that is bad than have a no call that's bad, like that pass interference that we saw. I would rather him have thrown that flag and it not have been a pass interference than him not throw the flag when it was a blatant pass interference. I think that if in your mind you believe that it's a penalty, I would in no way ever second guess throwing that flag. If I say, oh, I think that he got to the receiver before the ball got there, okay, take your flag out and throw it. Don't be thinking, oh my God, but what if I get some backlash for this? Oh my God. It's every referee, every umpire ever has made a bad call. Every single one. Ed Hockley, who is my favorite referee of all time, Gene Steratore, have all made bad calls, right? Joe West, who now is reaching the opposite of his prime, has made some bad calls, and everyone makes bad calls. You're going to make bad calls. It's going to happen. And I don't know. Reaching towards the end of October, in the NLCS, we saw the Dodgers come back from 2-1 to beat Milwaukee in a series that I thought Milwaukee should have won. Milwaukee, the Brewers, had, I think, a very easy chance to win that series. They should have won that series. They should have been in the World Series to face the Red Sox, and I think that the Brewers and Red Sox would have given us a better series than the Dodgers and Red Sox did. The Red Sox handled the Yankees in the divisional series. I don't know if you remember, but during the Athletics, the wildcard game, you had them all chanting, "We want Boston," and then they beat them like 20-3 or something like that in Yankee Stadium. Brock Holt hit for the cycle, and it was great. They played the Astros in the championship series, and Andrew Benintendi pretty much saved that series. It was bases loaded, 2 outs in the bottom of the ninth, and he made the catch of the postseason, laying out and making a spectacular catch. And really saved the series because it gave them the 3rd win of the series, I believe it was. And it really kind of showed that it wasn't going to be the Astros versus Dodgers for the 2nd year in a row. So I thought that was a good series, but the NLCS was really where it was. It went to a 7th game. It was in Milwaukee, and they couldn't do it. Chris Taylor had a huge catch to really save the game again, and it wound up saving the series, of course, because it was Game 7. If you save the game, then you save the series in Game 7. And it was a huge catch. Christian Yelich had a gapper, and it probably would have scored a run. But it was an amazing catch by Chris Taylor. Houston, if you remember, started off very poorly in football. This is the Texans. They started off very poorly, and then they went on a huge winning streak. And this is when that winning streak was starting. They had some big wins, and Deshaun Watson proved himself to be a leader. DeAndre Hopkins started picking up a lot of catches. J.J. Watt, Jadeveon Clowney started making the big tackles. The defense was playing terrifically, and it was very good. Moving on to November, the Pittsburgh Steelers were 7-2-1, heading to Denver, and then everything fell apart. There are 6 games left in the season. You're pretty much in the playoffs, but you still need to play very well because Lamar Jackson has proven himself now, and Lamar Jackson has proven himself to be a pretty good player in his few games. And Lamar Jackson is going to be playing now, and he is going to win games. So you, if you're the Pittsburgh Steelers, need to figure things out. And this is when they really, in this game, James Conner showed his rookie colors. And he's not a rookie, but how many snaps did he have last year? I mean, you just got to think. It was like he was a rookie. So he had a huge fumble that pretty much lost the game for them because they were driving. They probably would have. It would have been in the red zone, but he fumbled, and then Denver went down and scored a touchdown. This was one of the few good games that I saw Case Keenum play. He didn't have too many good games, and it just proved that it was the team. He was playing for the Vikings. He was playing for a good team. He was playing with Stephon Diggs and Adam Thielen and Kyle Rudolph, not Emmanuel Sanders, Demaryius Thomas, and, Cortland Sutton. And I'm not saying that Demaryius Thomas and Emmanuel Sanders are not good players, but their prime has passed. They're not the players they once were. Emmanuel Sanders, Super Bowl 50 that year, was great. He had a great year that year, and that was probably his last good year, and then he really started to decline out of his prime. Demaryius Thomas is always just a throw-up, and Demaryius Thomas had been traded. So you got Cortland Sutton and Emmanuel Sanders to throw to at that moment. In case Keenum wasn't liking either of those options, and I'm very surprised that he is the quarterback that they went after. And I know that Kirk Cousins wasn't going to go to Denver, but I don't know. It just, maybe they should have drafted a quarterback, but it was like they were going to rely on Paxton Lynch. Trevor Siemian was gone, so what were you going to do? You were going to have Case Keenum, and then you were going to have Paxton Lynch and Chad Kelly. And why are you going to rely on guys that have not proven themselves? And Paxton Lynch is a bust, ladies and gentlemen. Paxton Lynch is a bust. He is not going to figure things out. He is a bust. He proved himself in the preseason games, and he is a bust because Case Keenum outplayed him by so much. And that doesn't make any sense because Case Keenum is a role player. He's a game manager, is what he is. He's like a backup that you throw in there. He was like Matt Castle for the Vikings a few years ago. He went in there and he did his job. He played. He won some games, right? But Denver had a playoff shot early on. They were 6-2 and had a shot, and then it all just fell apart because teams knew. All of a sudden, Case Keenum showed his true colors with a team that wasn't the playoff team that the Vikings were last year. The Denver Broncos are not the 13-3 Minnesota Vikings. They're a team that is going to finish under 500 a lot of years, and you have Von Miller keeping that team relevant. That's what you pretty much have. You have Von Miller keeping that team relevant. But back to the Steelers. They then got the ball back. They were driving down the field, and they were on, I think it was like the 2-yard line. And these idiots, they learned nothing. They learned nothing from the Patriots game last year. They're on the 2, and instead of running it up the gut with your second-year running back who has proven that he can make these plays in big situations, you have Ben Roethlisberger, who is known for missing some big passes. He makes big passes, but as of recently, he has not made the big passes. And what you do is you put the ball in his hands at the 2, at Mile High Stadium, where it is one of the most high pressure when it's within a minute. And you have him throw a slant to Antonio Brown over the middle. And he throws it 2 yards behind him, and it probably would have hit him in the stomach, maybe in the hip. So that means that it's right at chest level for your big defensive linemen. He threw it to a defensive tackle, and it was intercepted, and that was the start of it all, because they finished 8-7-1. They were 7-2-1 coming into the Denver game, and that is where it all went downhill. They lost that game, and then they wound up losing 5 of 6, which just doesn't make any sense to me how you can lose with the talent on that team. With the defense that they have, you got TJ Watt and Joe Hayden leading that team, and then you're going to lose. And I know that they maybe probably really could have been in if the Cleveland Browns had made a couple more big plays at the end of their game, but it shouldn't come down to another team playing for you to get in. If you're going to lose 5 of 6, then you don't deserve to be in the playoffs. That's my thought on things. At this time, the Cleveland Browns were kind of out of the playoffs, but there was a chance. If once we reach December, and we're moving on to December now, November, kind of late October, it might have been, I'm not 100% sure. The Boston Red Sox beat the Los Angeles Dodgers 4-1. It was a 5-game series. And Steve Pearce would win the World Series MVP. He hit 3 home runs. He hit 2 big home runs in that final game. Now we're moving on to December. I didn't think the Vikings were going to make the playoffs, but I thought that the only way that they could was because the Bears are in this conference, or in this division, and I understand that the Bears are good. They have great defense, but you have a quarterback in Mitchell Trubisky that has struggled. He's not the most dependable guy, but one big thing that he has going for him is his pocket presence, and he knows when to get out of that pocket, and he knows when to get running, and he can run better. He can run just as good as everybody else. He can run just as good as Cam Newton. He's just not as big. And speaking of Cam Newton, the Panthers were 6-2, and they wind up, I think they lost 8 in a row to end the season. And it showed Cam Newton it was such a fluke. His MVP was such a fluke. I don't know how you manage to botch Christian McCaffrey's amazing year, but I don't know. I have no idea. It doesn't make much sense how Cam Newton can not figure out. Okay, so they finished 7-9. So they lose 7 of 8. Which doesn't... How do you manage to do that? That doesn't make any sense to me. And then their win was against the Saints in the final game of the season, when the Saints had none of their offensive starters playing. They won by 19, 33-14. So if we look where it all went wrong, so they managed to go 6-2. Then they headed to Pittsburgh, and they lost 52-21. Then they played Detroit and lost 20-19. They lost to Seattle. Then they lost to Tampa Bay. They lost to Cleveland. They lost to New Orleans. Then they lost to Atlanta. So they went on a 7-game losing streak. You're 6-2, and you lose 7 of 8. And then your one win in those 8 was a game that didn't even matter against a team that was starting Teddy Bridgewater, who I know, but he was injured. I get that, but he had not played. He hadn't played, and he was not football ready. Okay, like I get he's football ready, but he's not like big time game ready. Is I guess what I should have said. In December we saw the Miami Miracle. Kenyon Drake, big props for that, but it didn't even derail the Patriots at all. The Patriots still dominated the rest of the season. The Patriots showed why. They were still that dominant team that wasn't going to lose these big games. And the fact of the matter is, playoff Patriots. The playoff Patriots are so much different than regular season Patriots. That's the thing. That's what people don't, I think that they don't realize that. And it's that playoff Tom Brady is a completely different human being than regular season Tom Brady. They are basically two different people. And it's the same thing for like the offensive line, because he was getting sacked so much, and then they don't allow a sack against the Kansas City Chiefs, which I thought was huge. Last game of the season came on December 30th for the Minnesota Vikings, and it was terrible. They lose to the Bears. They needed a win or an Eagles loss, and the Eagles played the Redskins, who are starting a fourth string quarterback, and they were pretty much just give them the win, and they needed a Vikings loss to make it into the playoffs, and lo and behold, the Vikings fail to show up in a big home. It's basically it's a playoff game for you, because if you win that game, then you're playing the Bears again. It's a play-in game, and I think that play-in games are basically playoff games, because they're playing to go to the playoffs. So you need to have your playoff ready attitudes out there. And you know what they didn't have? They were not playoff ready. That was a team that didn't deserve to be in the playoffs. Philadelphia was a team that deserved to be in the playoffs, like it or not. Nick Foles is a playoff caliber quarterback. And if he doesn't get to go on a good team, personally, here's what I think about Nick Foles. I think that the Philadelphia Eagles should keep Nick Foles and trade Carson Wentz for a first-round pick, maybe a second, because I know full well that they probably will not win these big games with Carson Wentz. I know that. He had one good season. He tore his ACL at the end of that season. So technically speaking, and I know that you can say he didn't get a chance to win that playoff game. He didn't win a playoff game. Nick Foles had one of the most immaculate runs that we have ever seen by a backup quarterback. He beats the Falcons in a game that he didn't play very well in, I'll give you that. But he destroyed the Minnesota Vikings. He destroyed them. And that was a team that people were saying, oh my gosh, they're going to give the Patriots a run for their money in the Super Bowl. Nobody was talking about the Eagles, that they were going to win that game and go to the Super Bowl. Nobody was. It was like the Vikings were going to win that game and they were going to win it by 30 or 40 points. I know that 40 is a bit of a stretch, but people were seeing such a blowout. They were seeing Nick Foles being killed by Everson Griffin and Danielle Hunter and Linval Joseph coming up the middle. But what they failed to realize was that Nick Foles he flipped that switch that makes him so good in the playoffs, that has made him the Nick Foles that we're seeing today, that made him the Nick Foles that beat the Chicago Bears, that made him the Nick Foles that beat the New England Patriots, and that made him the Nick Foles that basically, without Nick Foles, they were not in the playoffs this year. And that is what I believe, and I think that if they get rid of Carson Wentz, and I understand that he's young, Nick Foles is 29 years old. So if you get rid of Nick Foles in favor of Carson Wentz right now, I'm sorry, but I think that that's a bit of a stupid decision. He won the Super Bowl MVP. At the least, he's going to get a starting job next year. I know that, and I'm pretty sure everyone else knows that. And if I were the Giants, here's what I would do if I was the Giants. I would either trade for Carson Wentz, because I think that Carson Wentz would play very well there. I think that Carson Wentz would play well there. He has a big name receiver to throw to. And that's the thing that they don't really... Yes, they have Alshon Jeffrey. Okay, they have Alshon Jeffrey. Wow. But he's not the big big name guy like Odell Beckham Jr. Odell Beckham Jr. is a household name. You don't even really need to be a football fan to know who Odell Beckham Jr. is. You walk up to a random person, you say, hey, do you know who Odell Beckham Jr. is? Yeah, he plays football. He's a wide receiver. He made that one really good catch. Oh my gosh, you know who Odell Beckham Jr. is. You've also got Sterling Shepard. I mean, it's not like they're just terrible. They need a quarterback. And I think that Carson Wentz would be that quarterback. Carson Wentz or Nick Foles would be that quarterback. I think that getting Dwayne Haskins, who I made a whole entire mock draft. I made an early mock draft, and that's going to be the next episode of this podcast. I'm going to be talking about a mock draft that I made over the course of the last couple of days because we haven't had school. It is Thursday. No, it's not. It's Wednesday, January 30th, and we have had 3 days off. We had a snow day, and it's been negative 50 degrees here. And then tomorrow, we're getting tomorrow off too. So I've had a lot of time on my hands. And I made a mock draft. I made a 2-round mock draft. I was thinking about doing a 3-round, but I figured that was a little bit much because we were going to start getting into the players who not a lot of people would know. That already starts to happen in the late second. But here's the thing. I think that Dwayne Haskins is going to be a pretty good college quarterback. And actually, now that I remember it, I don't have Dwayne Haskins going to the New York Giants. I have him going to, I think might have been the Patriots. I have Kyler Murray going to the Giants because I think that would be a good pick. But here's the thing. I wouldn't gamble. There. And I'm just going in my mock draft by what they would do if they didn't make a Nick Foles or a Carson Wentz trade. I think that it's such a gamble that you cannot take right now because you've got Saquon Barkley, who is, if they don't get a quarterback, he's going to waste away putting up all these yards, and he's not going to have anything to show for it. He's going to have nothing. He's going to be another Adrian Peterson if they don't figure things out pretty soon. Adrian Peterson won nothing. Saquon Barkley is a guy that you need to win a Super Bowl with because he's your running game. Not only is he your running game, he is also a passing game guy because he had over 2,000 scrimmage yards. And there is absolutely no reason that they should not be a playoff team this next coming season. This year, it was a stretch because you needed Saquon Barkley and there wasn't going to be any good quarterbacks left over because all the good quarterbacks were going to be picked by the time the second round came around. And all the quarterbacks pretty much were picked except for like Kyle Lauletta and Kyle Lauletta. That was pretty much it. There wasn't anyone else left over because Mason Rudolph was a first round pick. So here's the thing. They need a quarterback. And would you rather give up your first round pick for a guy that has proven himself? And I'm going to say that Carson Wentz proved himself because he's a quarterback. He will win games for you. I don't know yet if he's going to win any playoff games for you. I don't know if he's going to lead you to a Super Bowl quite yet. Would you rather have a guy that hasn't quite proven himself yet in Dwayne Haskins or Kyler Murray? Or would you rather have Carson Wentz or Nick Foles? You give up that first round pick. I know it's a 7th overall pick, but you're giving up the pick for a guy who will win you games. And if they get Carson Wentz or Nick Foles, they will go to the playoffs and they will at least win one playoff game. You can mark my words on that. But I don't think that if they get a rookie quarterback in the draft, I don't think that they're going to the playoffs next year if they pick a rookie. And that's kind of a hot take, and I know that might be a little bit disrespectful to Dwayne Haskins or Kyler Murray, who I expect to be picked by one of them. But it's, in my mind, that is what is going to happen. And I know it's just my opinion, but I believe that if we see a rookie quarterback go to that team, they will not make the playoffs. Because there's no way that they're going to start Dwayne Haskins or Kyler Murray day one. That'd be kind of a stupid play to do. That'd be a dumb move in my mind because you know they're going to start Eli Manning. Because I don't think that throwing a rookie quarterback right into the fire, I've never liked that. I didn't really like it when the Browns did it with Kaiser, but here's the thing. They had nobody else. They had Kevin Hogan and Cody Kessler. They had nobody else to throw out there. So they kind of had to do DeShone Kizer. And I think that if we see a rookie quarterback go there, then we're not going to see a playoff New York Giant team for another year. It's going to be probably, if they pick a rookie quarterback, it'll be 2 years from now. It'll be the year after next season that they're going to be a playoff team if they pick a rookie quarterback. Well, that was my 2018 year in review in sports. Thank you very much for listening, and if you enjoyed, leave a like, subscribe, comment about what you liked, and didn't like. And also maybe share with your friends. I don't know. I'm trying to just grow my channel. Maybe share with your friends. Send them this link. You can follow me on Instagram at the Premier Podcast. I'll put a link in the description for that. But thank you very much for listening. And next time, my next video will be my first mock draft. I'll be talking about the first mock draft of the year for the NFL draft. It'll be an early mock draft, so I won't have any combine scores or anything like that. But that'll be the next video that we see. So hope to catch you then.